All right. I have Jonathan Shane on the show, a fellow nutritional therapy practitioner and Mr. Keto Road CEO. Jonathan,
What's up?
what's up?
How you doing?
I am good. I was ready. When you have an appointment, you just kind of getting ready for it and you don't want to start anything in depth. So I started just doing a ton of just squirrel research on NAD, nitric oxide, all these different things I've been diving into that it's like, all right, put this aside for later. There's so many hot topics to dive into. And I wanted to bring you on the show because you seem to be speaking the same language and focusing on nutrition, nutritional therapy for the fit and active person, and how maybe we don't need to do so much fat, maybe add some protein in there, maybe we need to actually lift weights
Mm,
and adjust things. And as I get older, I keep talking about how to improve the aging process. And as I'm a female, obviously, that we might not do the same thing as a man would do. So
yep.
just how to really personalize everything together.
Yeah.
So I want to talk shop. So let's start with like who you are. What's your why? What do you do? What's your purpose? What's your mission? What's your
Yeah,
passion?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess we'll start with the mission because I think the mission is kind of the most bold statement. And it's to bring people to the fullness of Christ through mind, body, and spirit. So everything I do, my companies, my agenda, everything stems from trying to get people as close to that place as possible, whether it's through helping them figure out their weight loss, manage their hormones, work on self-positivity, work on their physical health, or even have a more in-depth spiritual conversation. Everything I do is how can I get this person one step closer to what I believe is, full enlightenment, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I do everything that I do. That's journey, kind of the development of that journey kind of started when I was younger. My parents split up when I was very young, and that led to a lot of emotional eating habits. So, fast forward through a lot of not, I wouldn't say binging. I didn't binge a lot, but I just ate constantly. So like, there was never like a big, I didn't sit down and have like four pizzas. I just ate like an entire family size bag of chips throughout the day. And then I'd have a granola bar here, candy bar there. And then I'd have two bowls of dinner. Just by the end of the day, it was just grazing all day.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward 14, 260 pounds. Didn't work out or anything. So I was very overweight, emotional eater, no sense of self-confidence. Uh, then around, I would say, yeah, like 14, 15 years old, my doctor went in for a check-in. She told me that I was dying. I was killing myself, which doctors generally are not that blunt at that age.
Yeah, that's what they
But
said. You're
really,
dying.
yeah, no, literally, she said you're killing yourself. She said if you were an adult, I'd put you on medications. She's like, but you can fix this. And I don't know why, but that got to me. That made me snap. And so I went home and I ran 2 miles and I got the shakes and I had like a hypoglycemic episode. And like I just remember that. I remember that whole day still. I had a cast from a hand I broke. It's like a whole thing. Started losing weight, very crash diety. Took all the fat out of my diet. I was eating like Captain Crunch and skim milk and chicken breast and spinach leaves. Like, that was
Oh,
literally my diet.
great.
Lost like 90 pounds. Started to really struggle with acceptance and fear of gaining fat back and losing what I felt was like, the proper image of human and all that jazz. And so developed severe bulimia. That got progressively worse to the point where I was, relapsing, throwing up multiple times a day, every day, school,
Mm-hmm.
weekend, didn't matter. Turned 16, became a Christian. That was a big point. Kind of gave me a sense of purpose and love and confidence and well-being outside of myself. So it was unconditional. It was objective, not subjective. And so I loved that. And I kind of clung to it. And that really helped me start dealing with my eating disorder. I didn't really deal with it, but it's helped me start trying to fight that battle. Forward to 23 now, been married for 3 years, and I fell upon the ketogenic diet. And the ketogenic diet just gave me a real powerful sense of control. And always been into like weightlifting and stuff because when I did lose weight, I was really into fitness and all that. And got into kind of bodybuilding, met Robert Sykes.
I was just gonna thinking of him going, you must know Robert Sykes because his
Yeah,
story
yeah, yeah.
so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I did a bodybuilding prep. I had him coach me. This is like 2017, 2018. This is like early into all this before keto really like picked up speed. And did a bodybuilding prep and went 9 months without relapsing, but I ended up relapsing after the show. And that's when I realized, okay, so my spiritual health really helped, my nutrition
Mm-hmm.
really helped. What's the missing link? And then that's when I realized I just didn't really like myself. I didn't really have a
Mm-hmm.
sense of self-worth, right? I had an unconditional worth from another being. I had a nutrition, nutritionally dense diet, but I didn't have any self-worth. Like I didn't have any worth placed on myself by myself. So I started working on that, and I haven't relapsed since. So it's been over 5 years at this point.
Do you have someone work with you to go through that? Because that's pretty tough to do on your own.
And that's why I work with people now on it when I'm coaching them. But no, I winged it. I winged it. And it was hard. It was hard. And I think one thing that helped me was I documented it on social media. So although I didn't work with somebody, there was accountability from the people that were watching me become free of this thing.
Yeah.
And I was being vulnerable about it. And I think that there was a level of, I need to get healthy because other people are watching me wondering, if he can get healthy, can I get healthy? And I think that there was a pressure that I created for myself there, which I think was really helpful. So all that went great. Started coaching, got into keto coaching, started working for Robert as a coach. And then in 2019, I kind of really wanted to step into my own creative flow. And so I started my own company, Keto Road LLC. And then COVID happened, and I was prepping for another bodybuilding show. COVID happened, and my show got canceled, and I wanted to get into running. I never ran. Well, I ran when I was like losing weight in high school, but I never like really ran. And so I started running. I remember I went out for a run. I ran 4 miles, and I was like, oh, that was easy. So I did it again, and I did it again. I got really obsessed with it. Decided I wanted to qualify for Boston. I don't know why. That was the first goal I had. I never ran farther
Just
than
go
4
big.
Oh yeah, no, I'm balls to the walls kind of guy. And so ran my first marathon 9 months after starting to run, and totally bombed, like 4 hours and 20 minutes, which I know that's not bad, but like for what I wanted compared to where I was, it was a reality check. It was quite humble. And in the mix of that, I started to really suffer from hormonal issues and injuries. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And I finally, after doing a lot of analysis, and we can dig into this more, but digging through all this stuff, I just realized that like the only thing I hadn't really addressed was my diet. I was doing a strict ketogenic diet. And so one of my friends was like, maybe you should start cycling in some carbohydrates, because I had tried high protein, high fat, all that. And so I started cycling in carbs. And for some reason, I know now why, but in the moment I was like, for some reason, like my injuries went away. My resting heart rate went back down. My blood sugar, my fasted blood sugar went from 120 on a strict ketogenic diet down to back into the 80s and 70s and 60s with carbs. Like my whole body started to heal again. And it was such an epiphany of the difference between an endurance-based athlete on a ketogenic diet, and depending on what they do, right? And we can those nuances. And then like just like a normal person just trying to like, heal themselves from insulin resistance. And it was such an epiphany. And so I got really fascinated with that. Saw the correlations between endurance training and then just women's health in general. So I started really focusing on women's health. And that's when I started specializing in that after I graduated from the NTA. And that kind of brings us to here.
That's a big journey. It's, everyone that's a practitioner has their story of their why. And that's why I always ask in the beginning of the show, what's your why? Purpose, mission, your passion, because we all have a story that brought us to where we are today to help other people like ourselves. Our avatar client is ourself, who we were looking for. So I'm trying to be that coach I wanted 10 years ago when I was searching for help, and I couldn't get anyone to understand from an athlete, high performing endurance athlete, just a type A, AAA person in general, that I didn't need. It wasn't working what people are telling me. And so I think it is looking at more of a holistic approach and looking at the mindset of a high performer. And if you're an athlete, what are some things to look at differently through a different lens is essential to really getting results, as you found in your path.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you are ketogenic, and this is what I've talked about for years, because we've done, keto or low carb. I've done it for years, but I never really was like obsessed as people get when they start into being in nutritional ketosis and checking that I have to get 0.5 to, 3.0 on their ketones. And to me, it's like, if I don't have health issues, is that necessary? Or is it just good enough to be fat adapted athlete burning fat? Do I need to be in strict nutritional ketosis? And a lot of people always ask us, when I want to stay in ketosis while I'm on a bike ride or while I'm running. So I always wonder, okay, what's the point? Why do you need that? What's your goal? And I think that's when we need to personalize nutrition, the fueling and the training program and the lifestyle program to figure out how to best be your athletic self, or just improve the aging process, or just to manage your weight. And I'm more about not weight loss, but body composition, recomposition.
Yeah. I think, it's interesting. I think there's a couple things going on there, especially for the athlete. And of course you have people that, I think this is important to note too, because we're talking about people that were athletes that maybe gravitated more towards a low carb ketogenic diet due to, gut issues, or, they just wanted to try a different fuel system. They read up on it, all that stuff. But also we have people that were overweight and unhealthy on a standard American diet, went ketogenic, got healthy, and then became athletes.
Yes.
And so they're also trying to navigate this thing where they're now being told that if they want to be competitive, there's a little bit of nuance there that they have to consider, where they might have to reintroduce and I don't agree with this. I think there's a lot of things we could flesh out here in terms of like what we categorize as good carbs, bad carbs, all that jazz. But in their minds is, so I have to reintroduce the foods that put me in an unhealthy spot to begin with, carbs, and they refuse to do that. And so for them, I think it's really, really a big deal for them to stay in nutritional ketosis, because they feel like if they step out of those lines, they're going to just self-implode. And I think that, and I don't think that's a healthy mindset, right? I think that's very, and not that they're stupid. I think that's ignorant, just because there's a lack of information there, because this is a new world for them and they're trying to figure it out. But no, I definitely don't think that you need to be in nutritional ketosis in order to be a fat burning athlete. I think exactly as you said, it's about fat adaptation. It's about making sure that the mitochondria feels that while it's in an aerobic state, it can predominantly burn fatty acids. It's going to keep, on a lower lactate threshold. And also it keeps us from having to eat as many carbs, if we do eat carbs, if we're trying to be competitive, as a high carb or a carb-based athlete. And so that gives us an advantage in terms of less chance of gut rot, less chance of, nausea, less chance of just digestive issues during races. It gives us a lower lactate threshold, so our burnout is lower, our anaerobic ceiling is higher, so we burn fat more efficiently. There's a gajillion reasons, right? And we can definitely get into all that, but I definitely think that there's a place for it, but I don't think it needs to be as anal as like, oh my gosh, 0.5 mile 50 of my run. If I'm not at 0.5, I'm going to freak out. Like, someone give me some liquid ketones, because like I need to get it back up. And it's like, well, no, not necessarily, because, and oh my gosh, I could literally talk shop on this forever, because blood ketones annoy me. And if you notice, like I have a couple affiliate stuff, right? I have my own company and a couple companies that I work with. None of them are keto monitors. And there's a reason for that. It's because I don't promote blood ketone checking, because I think at first, if you want to check it once or twice, it's great. But I think that it's a rabbit hole that people don't need to go down, because at the end of the day, especially as you get more efficient, especially for athletes, right? Like think of the FASTER study, or studies where they're looking at fatty acid oxidation inside of the tissue versus what the blood ketones say, right? Like Zach Bitter might be at a 0.2 in his blood ketones when he's in a ketogenic phase, but he's consuming 1.5 grams of fat per minute, which if you don't understand what that means, that is a lot. If you don't know what that, like, that's a lot. But yeah, that's not what's reflective in the blood ketone monitor. And so I think there's a lot of nuance there that's not discussed, just because, again, a lot of these people that are trying to get into endurance sports or athletic things, especially in the keto space, are coming from a place of being unhealthy and then trying to like add athleticism on top of this newfound diet that's healed them. And I think that causes a little bit more friction and misunderstanding.
True. Yeah. I think it's where, that's why I think people need coaches, because you need to meet the client where they are at and personalize it. Like, where should your nutrition plan be? What are your workouts? What's your intensity? What's your duration? Are you male or are you female? And then female, what era are you, or stage in your hormonal life, at pre-menopause, post-menopause? I mean, it all changes. So I think it's really looking at eating real food, as we learn nutritional therapy, that balances your blood sugar. And I always say that, what I learned from nutritional therapy is, I've said for years, and it's eating real food. Everyone can title it keto, carnivore, paleo, autoimmune. It's all looking at food that heals you. And that's going to be different for each person. And if you need to avoid plant toxins, if you have high oxalate and you have lectin issue, I mean, you can go all over the place in what to eat. And there's not one exact diet for everyone, but to eat real food. And what I've kind of focused on lately since 2020, I met Dr. Gabrielle Lyon at the last nutritional therapy conference we had in person right before the world changed. Were you at that conference? Were you
No,
in NTA
so I
yet?
graduated from the NTA. I graduated, so I was the last in-person classes. Like I graduated like in the heat of the lockdown.
Yeah, because our conference, the last one, I wish they'd do it again, but it was February 2020. And
Oh
I
yeah, no, I
remember
was still
I
in
was
school.
flying home from Portland, which I live in Seattle at the time. So I don't know. I flew for some reason because I didn't feel like driving. It's a 45-minute flight. And I just remember everything changed after that. But Dr. Gabrielle Lyon spoke with Cynthia Thurlow and Dr. Anna Kabecka, who I've all just became friends with and mentors and peers. But the protein, focusing on protein. And this is where I think, it's like a pinball machine. And in our world of what to eat, what's hot, what's trendy is carnivore right now, and doing the bacon, beef,
Eggs and
butter
butter.
and eggs, Dr. Canberry's plan.
BBB and E.
Yeah. And,
Oh,
and as the smashed fish he added on. But I think it's, taking all this information and then putting it into terms for the fit and active individual and the aging individual, how it's going to be a little different than someone's metabolically unhealthy. So it depends on the person itself. And then lastly, I'll stop talking, is just what my point is, the protein, that we can adjust the fat, adjust the carbs based on nature's carbs, based on your exercise duration, intensity, and more on that you can go into strategic carb timing. But it's everyone needs to focus on protein. And I think we forgot that when people got into keto, is all like fat, 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 fat. And then people, even this company I know was hiring me to coach their clients, and like, you're not talking about protein, you're just all fat, and their protein grams when they did their keto calculator was like 40 grams of protein a day. I was like, I can't agree with that. You need to have 100 grams or more a day. And I like Dr. Lyon's simple protocol, especially for athletes and aging individuals, the 1.0 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight. Simple.
yep.
And then the 30 to 50 grams to help the muscle protein synthesis. So that's kind of where I've come to. It's like, let's focus on prioritizing protein and then figure out your fat and your carbs based on the rest of the details we need to look at.
Yeah, I find so it's interesting you bring that up because I agree. So like I have 3 phases of keto that I've kind of developed for, and this is for my clients that are athletes or not. Like I think they should all go through this initiation phase, as I call it. You have phase 1, which is
Like
like
fat adaptation phases.
yeah, so you have
Program,
like a fat adaptation phase. It's like 8 to 10 weeks. But phase
yes.
2, and I always tell them phase 1 and phase 2 are both essential. Phase 3 is the carb phase, which again, depending on your activity, you might not even need to play around with that. You might be fine. But phase 2 is essential. And phase 2 is the protein phase where you need to decrease fat and you need to increase protein to 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. So it's funny that you brought up Dr. G's recommendation, because I totally agree with that. And I think that it's funny. I see 2 kinds of people that I work with, because I work with people that have been keto for a long time or standard American diet, and they don't know how to eat enough protein. And so, and especially in women, I see that a lot. Like they just don't eat protein. And
one egg.
Because I think 2 reasons. I think 1, they just don't know. And I think 2, unfortunately, they've been brought up in a society where a lot of protein means a large quantity of meat and food. And they're told, why are you eating so much? Why are you eating so much? And so like that idea, it's okay to have a pound of steak, slam it, be a savage. Let's go. There's a hard cultural shift there that has to happen. Yeah. Yeah. And so I definitely see that. And I agree with you. I think that's one of the issues. What I also see though, especially in the carnivore community, is people that don't have the right carb to fat energy balance. And so like they may need more carbs, but because they're carnivore, they don't want to add carbs in because they think those are bad. And then they don't want fats too high because they don't want to drink butter. And so what they do to feel full is they try to satisfy those hunger hormones by eating a lot of protein, like an obnoxious amount of protein, like 2 grams per pound of ideal body weight. right? And they start having serious digestive issues because they're consuming too much. And not that the protein's doing anything in terms of fat gain or hormone disruption, but it's just it's hard. Your body has to break it down, and that's a lot of protein to break. 130-pound female eating 200 grams of protein. I mean, you're asking a lot of your digestive tract, especially if you already have like gut dysbiosis and other kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so I definitely see the other end of the stick too. But yeah, that 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight is a great measuring stick for like, am I putting myself in the best position for longevity? Because some people, when I'm talking to them about protein and fat, especially in athletes, I tell them, I'm like, fat adaptation is important. So like I definitely think there's an important part of going ketogenic, even as an athlete, where you should remove everything but the fat for a short period of time. And when I say everything, I don't mean 0 grams, but lower them, right, considerably. So your mitochondria can get efficient at metabolizing fatty acids. It's not really worried about other things. It's not scratching at the protein because it's very carb dependent at that point, right? Like it's just kind of focusing on that. If you want to really work on that aerobic ceiling, you want to work on your fatty acid oxidation efficiency. But that's only for that. In terms of longevity, in terms of living a long, healthy, functional life and being a competitive athlete that isn't not progressing at all, protein is the key. If you want a long life where you don't have, muscle atrophy as you age, and, where you're actually progressing as an athlete, whatever sport you're in, you've got to get to a point where you're hitting an adequate amount of protein. Because if you don't, you're not going to get where you want to get. Like for me, now granted, I'm an ultra runner, right? So I run a lot and I also cross train and all that. But I mean, I eat 1.5 grams per pound of ideal body weight every day. And it works well for me. But I think if I didn't do that, I wouldn't progress near as much as I have. No way.
Well, I'm starting to do full-time ideally in January. Pnoe metabolic testing. I bought the equipment. I used to test 10 years ago, a different product, New Leaf company, metabolic testing, but now this is portable. So I can test people's metabolism at rest. And it's pretty fascinating. I can't wait to just do this every day to really see what different levels of fat burner to carb burners we have out there, and people that are fit and active versus people that are more sedentary, and test how many calories are you burning a day with this test, and then your percentage of fat to carbs burned at rest. And then the exercise test you can do on a bike or a treadmill, depending on the person's sport they do, and do a 12-minute VO2 max type of test and to see where they're burning the fat through each heart rate range. And so you're doing 1-minute increment tests. So I love testing because it's so fascinating to see, what fuel source are you burning where, and where do you switch your fuel sources, and where are you burning the most calories? Where is your fat to carb crossover point? Where is your peak fat burning? And where are your HIIT training zones and your zone 5, your sprint interval training? And then you can figure out where someone's not doing enough work in. And especially as we go into talking more about the aging athlete and the female, that we need to, really switch how we're training as we age and not do so much zone 2. And everyone's talking about zone 2 as well. You have to do in zone 5 if you're want to improve your longevity. Peter Attia for one of them that's all the big talk about. But how do you know what you need as a unique individual? It's not this one size fits all approach again. It's going to be, let's personalize your training program by testing and not guessing what's going on at a cellular level. So then figure out your nutrition.
Yeah, no. I've done a VO2 max twice now. And I really like VO2 max tests. I think they really get a good. I'm interested in what you just talked about, the one where you can test. Is it a VO2 max? You don't move, right? It's at rest.
It's a VO2 max test. Like I did someone's yesterday on the treadmill. But the problem I find, most people get the test done and they don't have someone interpret the results right. And so if you don't, we give a whole report, Pnoe, the company I use, but then I analyze the data, analyze their nutrition exercise program, look at their nutritional therapy. I use all the NutriQ forms and go that. But anyways, then you can really dial in what their training program should be based on their limiters identified.
I don't have it. I would love to. So I did a VO2 max test once, and it was really fascinating because I'm a low carb athlete, right? Like my carbs right now, they're around 200 grams because I'm about to race on Saturday. So the next 3 days, they're around 200. But before that, they were in 50. You know, I cycle in and out. I do strict carnivore, depending on how my body feels, all that stuff. Before that, I was strict keto for 4 years. Anyways, so my aerobic threshold based off this VO2 max, you'll find this fascinating. So I'm 28. So my aerobic threshold should be roughly 155, 160, depending. So it was like 138, right? My aerobic threshold was 138.
What does that mean, aerobic threshold? Is that where you're
So like
burning
that's
the
where
most
like you go
fat?
from, that's like peak fat burning.
Okay.
So after that, you start to burn more carbs and fat.
Yeah. So your metabolic crossover points where the carbs, the fat goes down, the carbs go up, and that range is kind of the top of your zone 2.
Correct. Which is odd because I can sustain most people, their zone 2. Zone 2 is where they can sustain like a marathon. A marathon, you want to be in your zone 2. The thing is that I run a marathon, my average heart rate is 165 the whole time, and I hold that steady. So like my heart rate is, or like even like a okay, here's a fascinating part of VO2 max though. My lactate threshold is 182. And I've confirmed that because when I run a half marathon, like when I'm as fast, my average heart rate's 180, which is like way over that. But like I can do that on 0 carbs. It's so like I don't know if the test is on. I never got to go retest it. We talked about retesting because it was just so bizarre based off of like my average heart rate and my paces when it comes to my racing as it translated to the test and the results, and also the ranges, right? Like the fact that my lactate threshold was 50 beats or 45 beats per minute higher than my aerobic threshold. My crossover point that's a huge margin. That almost doesn't even make sense. Super fascinating. I don't know what your thought is on that, but I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah. Well, that's what I look at, what people are eating beforehand and kind of get an idea of what's your typical nutrition plan and your fueling in and around workouts, and how do you train and by heart rate. And when we do a metabolic test, we figure out there are 5 zones, and I was just going to record another podcast and how we determine each zone. So zone 2 is your peak, your fat max, where you're burning the most calories and the lowest amount of carbs, most fat. And then the metabolic crossover point is your top of zone 2. The zone 3 is going to be that fuel source switching. You're starting to have more lactate for fuel. And then you get into zone 4, and then zone 5 is more the creatine phosphate fuel source. So we can look at the breath, like how many breaths per minute you take changes in each zone. So we identify the 5 zones, and then you can see how many calories they're burning per minute and kind of get an idea, which is never the same as outdoor running or biking or racing.
I need to do a test. I want to hear, maybe that test. I would love to get a test done by someone like you and have you read it, because
come out to San Diego.
Yeah. Well, my one of my coaches that works for me lives out in San Diego, so
there you go. Come up to North County, Solana Beach. Good place. It's right by the beach, so you can go for a nice 2-mile long walk on the beach afterwards and go in the water.
Love that. Yeah, I'm down.
So yeah, and that's why I think it's important as we learn in nutritional therapy, work on your foundations, work on your digestion, what you're eating, how you're eating, when, why, and look at the person as we're looking at athletes. We're not looking at, maybe you're not metabolically unhealthy, maybe you are, because a lot of people, I keep talking about this podcast being more fit and healthy from the inside out. Low carb could mean 100 grams a day to 200 grams a day. It depends on the athlete and the individual. So that's why I hate saying keto, because people, or low carb even, I struggle with people think I'm saying no carbs. I'm like, no, you need certain nature's carbs, real food, not the crap, in and around the workouts when you're doing high intensity interval training, which as an aging athlete, I'm learning from Dr. Stacy Sims that female people need more 20, 30-second sprints, all out, balls to the wall, recover, and not so much zone 2, where men need more zone 2. And so it's different per gender and where we are in life. So then the carbs have to be around the workout because we are more insulin resistant, and looking at that as an individual. So with you doing long distance training, and I've talked to Zach Bitter and I've been on his show, and that we're talking about strategic carb timing, as Peter Defty talks about, is I think we all agree is those carbs are quality, and we're not eating the bagels and the muffins and the scones and the Cliff bars and all that. That's just way too much. And even Dr. Gabrielle Lyons, in that you need some carbs, she's not anti-carb, but protein, 30 to 50 grams of carbs. The protein and carbs are similar. So 1-to-1 ratio if you are metabolically healthy. And so that's interesting to look at. Okay, how about for the athlete that's doing endurance sport, not the CrossFit athlete? Do we need carbohydrates? And I always think it depends on the person, the gender, and where you are. So what have you found with, you talk about eating a little bit more carbs, and what would that carb, what's your definition of a carbohydrate for improved performance when you are doing maybe a longer run that you still burn some, it's not like you're not burning any carbohydrates, because I can see this when I'm metabolic testing people. I see there is fat, but there is some carbs always being burned. So when you are going for a 30-mile run, you're staying low heart rate probably. And what fuel source you're using, how do you fuel?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I think understanding too, like why you need the carbohydrates, because there's a lot of variables going on. It's energy, it's fuel usage, right? So we talk about using fats and carbohydrates as energy, but there's also cortisol. There's also making sure that that's staying low and that's staying balanced. So I tend to say that I try to use carbohydrates as more from a hormone balance standpoint rather than a fuel standpoint. They definitely play a role in my fuel, but I definitely try to look at them as like more of a supplement, not a food, if that makes sense. Even though I eat whole food carbs, but it's like they're supplemental. I'm using them to keep my body in a healthy place. I'm not necessarily eating them just to have them. And I think that's an important difference, right? Because if you go like you stand in line for like a marathon race and all you hear is everybody talking about how they're so excited to eat spaghetti afterwards. And it's like they're running to eat carbs, and I'm eating carbs so I can run my best. And I think that there's a difference there, right? Because it allows me to be a little bit more nuanced with my intake of them. And as you said, right, like if I'm on a 50-mile run, hopefully, unless I'm super excited or I start off too fast or something stupid happens, I'm going to be staying in a zone 2, what I've been training to do the whole time. And I'm going to be predominantly burning fat, right? I can run, I've ran 30 miles fasted in a zone 2, easy. And so, but even if that's happening, there's a slight trickle of glycogen, right? You're using some, especially when we get into like mountain runs, we start talking about mountains and things like that, because when you go uphill, I don't care how zone 2 you are on average, you are ripping through glycogen climbing. And so if you're not accounting for that in your nutrition plan, what ends up happening is you end up kind of what we call bonking. One thing I've noticed though, I'll give it this: ketogenic athletes don't bonk like carb-based athletes do. When carb-based athletes bonk, it's like they can't run. Whereas low carb ketogenic athletes that are fat adapted, they have an advantage there where even if their nutrition's bad that day, if they bonk, they just really slow down into a deep, low zone 2, low 1 pace that allows their heart rate to stay really low, but they can still move their legs. Like their body has that access to those fatty acids in a more efficient way. And so I definitely noticed that, like if my nutrition's bad, I don't like stop running. I just run really, really slow for the heart rate that I'm at. But we obviously try to avoid that. And so carbohydrates timed right with my running is really important. And so what I try to do is I try to all my runs, unless I have an evening run. And so I have to manage some of my nutrition beforehand, but I try to start all my runs fasted. Like I think for me, I think
you as a male, because this is a huge topic.
Yeah, we're going to get to that.
Women fasted is not such good outcome as we think.
No, correct. So I actually got in a really heated debate with this with some registered dietitian the other day, because she was making a video how you need to eat. And someone commented and was like, hey, I don't feel as good eating. And she's like, well, just keep doing it till you feel better. There's no other way. And so what I always tell clients is I say, try both and see what makes you feel best. And more often than not, especially in women, like a tablespoon of honey before like a 5-mile interval it can make all the difference, right? And the way their body deals with it, the stress level, the way they respond and rebound afterwards, or even just like a whole meal, right? But I start all my runs fasted. I think most men can easily start most runs fasted. But if my run goes over 60 minutes, I strategically start adding carbs in during that bout of exercise. So, I have very few carbs that I eat, believe it or not. I eat white rice, gluten-free sprouted organic non-GMO oats. I'm really intentional with those check boxes. And then mangoes, grapes, strawberries, and blueberries.
Wow.
Those are like, and occasionally sourdough. I have to, because I'm lying if I don't add that. Those are the 7 carbs I eat. Like that's it. I just rotate them. But those are what I eat for like going on runs and all that stuff. I try to aim for about 20 to 40 grams of carbs per hour, roughly. And that tends to do well. And trying to give people, because people listening to this that are like ketogenic or are trying to figure out how to do this the right way, they might go, wow, that's so much. That's like 4 days. But you have to think in retrospect, like, so if I run for 10 hours straight and I'm shooting for say 30 carbs on average an hour, that's 300 carbs for that whole race. I know that sounds like a lot, but a high carb athlete, I mean, I have friends that literally shoot for like 120 carbs an hour. So they're eating like 1,200. Right. So the difference between like what a low carb athlete can do with carbs, and it's just night and day, like our efficiency. Right. The thing about like Zach Bitter, you talked to him. He's a beast. He is so fat adapted. But his last race, I think he weighed 795 grams of carbohydrates during that 100-mile bout.
That the javelina one he just
the javelina, But there was a couple things there. The carbohydrates help with hydration. It was super hot, right? And that javelina is hot. And so it helps with hydration. It helps with electrolyte retention. It helps with, so all that has to be factored in when you, the more competitive you get, the more nuanced things get.
Well, it's like Dan Plews, who they do the same products as fuels and work with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and some people are like, that's a lot. I'm like, well, that's still like only like 65% of like what his competitors are doing. So he still has an advantage there in terms of like ingestion of food and things like that. But I found that really works well for me. And so when it comes to training, I try really hard to eat carbs around my workouts. And then I really am all for like post-workout recovery carbs too. Like many of my clients, I tell them, hey, right after your, especially my women clients, because I work with a couple of male endurance clients, but a lot of like even my like CrossFit or like just athletes in general that work out, or maybe we're just trying to manage hormones. Because again, there's definitely a difference between a male and a female athlete, but women in general need strategic carbs just due to their hormones and the way that I've seen the parallel between how their sex hormones and stress hormones and their relationship, how that's very parallel to like an endurance athlete's stress responses. And so I give them very similar advice. If like they're going to a workout, I always tell them, so whether they're like an endurance athlete or like just like a person just trying to get into fitness, I always tell them like, have like, a protein shake with some sweet potato, or have a protein shake with a little bit of honey or something like that is going to replenish the glycogen you just burned for you, so that your body is not stressing out trying to create the glycogen on its own. Because people, we love the idea of gluconeogenesis because obviously it keeps a ketogenic person from dying, right? Like it keeps our blood sugar stable. But we have to realize that the reason why our body has that process is because blood sugar drops too low. That triggers cortisol, and the cortisol triggers a bunch of processes that create more blood sugar that they gets converted into glycogen and then gets stored. Problem though is that when that's constant and you just got done working out, you just got done with a 20-mile bike ride or a 10-mile run or whatever. And so the stress of that run, recovering from the run from a skeletal muscular perspective, and then you're putting on the stress of your body trying to rebound the glycogen and everything else, you're demanding a lot from your body. And then put on top of that, if you're a female hormones, let's say you're going in your luteal phase, now you're just stacking. You are stacking. Or let's say you're going through perimenopause or menopause, you're stacking. And so being able to strategically add in carbohydrates post-workout, I think is extremely beneficial for a lot of people. And so I'm a big component of that. I'm definitely, I'll go carnivore ketogenic about 2 weeks before a race. I'll go for 10 days leading up, and then the last 3, I'll add in some carbs to make sure my glycogen's topped off for the race and all that. But definitely the week after, which I'm so excited, Thanksgiving is the week after my race. I'll definitely have way more carbs because I'm trying to get my body to focus on just recovering my muscles and not stress out. I wanted to know, hey, bud, you don't have to do this all on your own. I'm going to help you out because I want to get back to a predominantly fat burning place as soon as possible. And when you don't help your body with replenishment of carbohydrates, of glycogen, your body doesn't go back into a place of more ketogenic anyways. Like a lot of people, I could literally rant about this, so please cut me off if you need to, but a lot of people, they assume that if they don't eat carbohydrates after a long endurance bout, we're talking about endurance athletes here, we're not talking about like CrossFit or like bodybuilding, we're talking about endurance athletes. A lot of them think if they don't eat carbohydrates that they're going to stay ketogenic and therefore they've won. But they have to understand that if your body is constantly trying to replenish glycogen that you're not replenishing through your dietary lifestyle choices or your diet, your body is constantly streaming out blood sugar to make that conversion itself. And so even though you're not eating carbs, you are not ketogenic. I've seen people include carbohydrates during or post workout and be in ketosis within 2 hours. And then other people that refuse to do that because they don't want to not be keto, and they haven't seen ketosis in 4 or 5 days, maybe a week, maybe a month.
Because of the cortisol.
Yeah, it's because of cortisol. It's because they're not replenishing their. It takes 24 hours for them to replenish the glycogen, but by that time they're already worked out again. They're already ripping back into something they didn't even let replenish. Mm-hmm. So that, I think that's where that nuance comes in, and that's something that I had a rude awakening about when I first started running, because I went into it strict keto. In fact, I have a podcast with Robert where I was like, zero carbs. I'm going to be a zero carb runner, and I was just ignorant. I just didn't know. And I learned that there is no such thing as one way. And I love that you said that. Like when you say low carb, like low carb doesn't mean 50 carbs. It doesn't mean 100. It doesn't mean 200. It means whatever you need to be the best fat burner you can possibly be. And realizing that carbs can be part of that equation is a hard thing for some people to wrap their minds around.
Yeah. Well, I have a list of comments from your everything.
Sorry, my little rant. Sorry.
It's all right. I could talk forever and people probably don't want to listen to me. So where to go back? I think post-workout, yes, feeling safe. Having some real food carbs is having some berries in my smoothie. The thing is, I think when you're starting, and I've done this for 15 years now, I was so strict before. And I think it is learning how to, it's almost like a just body eating disorder, that we're so strict that I can't have any carbs. And when I was doing Ironmans and I had my adrenal exhaustion in 2013, then I realized I was so strict. And that's when everything kind of fell apart. I was not paying attention to my red flags. And I think a lot of us need to learn how to find your intuition and your body's innate intelligence to listen to that. And we lose that ability being so strict, driven, one-sided, viewing that I have to stay this way. This is what everyone's telling me to do, and not listening to what your body needs. And sometimes people, especially if you had eating disorders and you have binge cycle with carbohydrates and get off any sugar is going to set you off into a binge, that it's, going to be tricky. But how to listen to your body that, oh, it's okay to have some berries. Maybe like for me, if I have bread, I could eat the whole loaf of bread. That would be my trigger to go off. Like if it was, that's for me, someone's sugar or their cocaine would be having really good, yummy bread with olive oil and sea salt. Then I can eat the whole loaf and not even be full. So I think it's figuring out what foods are not triggers that are good carbohydrates to have in that post-workout window. And Stacy Sims talks about women need this 30-minute post-workout window to feel safe and get the cortisol to come down from being in a catabolic breakdown state to get your body back into anabolic to repair, rebuild, versus men can wait up to 3 hours. And so we figure out that window, but giving yourself permission to have some healthy nature's carbs, as like I finally started eating russet potatoes. My husband makes really good wedgie potato kind of French fry things in bacon fat, and we have those with our burger patty. And I would always feel so guilty, like, oh my God, I can't eat that, but then I think you kind of ease up, realize, oh, that's not bad for me. Eating a bag of chips is bad for me, or having all the processed foods. But that was one thought. Another thought is just knowing that if you are when to push pause and reset, when you are trying to do what I say in my, like, what do I do? Is if you're trying to do all the right things, listening to this ketogenic, keeping your carbs 50 grams a day. I just talked to someone last week. I was doing a metabolic test. They're doing 50 grams. Oh no, he's doing 20 grams of carbs a day, trying to run 5 days a week, hard for 5 miles, and doing lifting weights 4 days a week. Like, why are you doing 20 grams a day? Let's look at what you're eating. I think it's learning how to figure out, I might need to course correct and adjust my program if I'm not getting the results that I want to get. So if you're doing this program, and I always say the word insanity, expecting different results by, keep trying the same program, maybe you have to experiment as you've done a lot of with your nutrition, timing it. Women, yes, we are more insulin resistant and people are metabolically unhealthy. But if you are having a key workout that requires more carbohydrate, glycogen, or, ATP fuel source from creatine phosphate, maybe, well, then you don't need carbs. But if you need more glycogen storage workout for more of a 1 to 5 minute intervals, for example, or tempo workout, experiment. If I'm slow, I'm not recovering, I feel like crap, maybe I need to adjust what I'm doing and not be so strict that this is what ketogenic is defined as. Might be different for you being a fit and active individual. Here's my rant.
Yeah, no, I can definitely tell you're a nutritional therapist. And I love that. I love that bio-individuality, right? And I think, what you just said is really, really important. And the reality really is the nuances. We love the nuances. We're fascinated with nuances. The people that are like trying to reset are just trying to get in and they're trying to understand, okay, what do I do next? Okay, I've heard a couple of Debbie's podcasts. What do I do? I'm scared. I think a couple things. I think one, realizing that your favorite athlete, their diet should not be your diet, right? I think that's important. But two, also your favorite keto, low carb, or whoever influencer should also not be your diet. It's about you, and realizing that it's not about you. Keto is not this castle. And I know we keep bringing up that word, but it's just because it's just part of the athletes that we talk to and that listen to us. That, there's this building, and you can do keto if it fits your macros, plant-based. Let's say we got a bunch of houses and everybody loves to fit in their house, right? There's this tribalism mentality that humans have, and realizing that, no, stop. You don't need to live in a compound. Like, go build your own shed and love your shed and live in your shed and be happy in your shed. And if that shed has some wood from the keto house and some wood from the if it fits your macros house and some wood, like, that's all that matters. Like, you need to figure out what do you want in life? Do you want to be known as like the strict keto person, or do you want to be the best runner, best mother, best father, best female athlete, best male athlete you can be? Like, what do you really want out of life? And realizing that keto can be a tool, low carb can be a tool, animal based can be, these things can be tools to help you find the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
I think is a really important mindset shift. And on that, I think a couple tips, because I know we talked about like berries and honey and all that. Something that because I work with people with eating disorders a lot. And one thing that I tell them often is one of the best things you can do is to avoid trauma-based foods. Meaning, if it's a food that you can remember binging, don't eat it. Like, even if it's whole food, right? Like, if you remember like slamming sweet yams at Thanksgiving until you felt sick, just don't eat sweet potatoes. Like, avoid sweet potatoes. And then also just like, there are so many savory carbs that you can have post-workout. Like, you don't have to eat sweet stuff. Like, there's gajillion varieties of squash that you could eat that are very, very savory in nature, that are whole food based, that are good for you. Like, you don't have to go to the sweet thing. Carbs don't have to be sweet. And you don't have to eat trauma. Like, if you can eat a whole bundle of bananas, then don't eat bananas. Like, just don't eat them. There's so many other options. And so I think helping someone just navigate those things in simple steps, and also like helping people understand that an apple is not a funnel cake. But we've done that. We've created this environment where like an apple is a funnel cake, and it's so ridiculous. Like, there's so many things wrong with a funnel cake, and the apple literally just grew. It did no harm. It just grew off a tree. And yet we think they're the same thing, and they're just not. It's the same thing as like a rabbit hole of like athletes and like fructose, and people worried about fatty liver disease and And it's like, well, you'd have to eat fatty liver disease. You'd have to eat 50%. I made a post about this the other day. You'd eat 50% of your calories from fructose to get fatty liver disease. You realize that's like 250 cups of blueberries in one day. Like if you were eating 2,000 calories a day, is an
Wow.
obnoxious amount. And so I think that we have to realize that we live in a world on social media. And I think this is really, I really do think that this is going back to kind of like athletes. I definitely think this is more intense for them because most athletes come from a place of there's trauma involved, whatever trauma they have gone through. I know I have my traumas that definitely help define like the things that I pursue and the passions I have. There's self-worth that they want to have. There's self-image stuff that they wrestle through. And all that's exacerbated by the diets we eat and what we're told is right and what we're told is wrong. And so I think really just kind of going back to that first analogy, like building your own house and like being
Mm-hmm.
comfortable in that house,
Mm-hmm.
and really asking yourself, like you said, like at the beginning of the podcast, would you ask me, what's your why, John? Like, what is your why? And if your why is not to be the person that drinks only melted butter to run their ultras, then like don't be that person. Like be the person, be the best person that you could possibly be and be willing to deal with nuance and try things. And guess what? Here's the beautiful thing about life, Tippy. Beautiful thing about life. If you try something and it doesn't work, you can just move on. It's great. It's wonderful.
Yep.
Right. And so many people
Pivot.
aren't willing to try. And
Pivot.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. I think, and I listen to a lot of fellow podcast friends as Cynthia Thurlow and Brad Kearns and Mike Mutzel. It's funny listening to everyone pivot, that reset that, okay, maybe as an athlete, I'm fasting too long. Maybe as an athlete, I'm doing too much of
Mm,
low zero carb, or maybe I'm doing too much cold plunges and too much sprint. I mean, I think I always say for years, the Goldilocks effect. Everyone, I just laugh at everyone like, oh, we're going to do cold plunge 10 minutes a day, every day of the week. And I'm going to do an hour in the sauna. And, we're going back to those stressors. They all accumulate. So if you're doing that on top of a stressful life, on top of doing endurance exercise, which over 45 minutes, even 30 minutes is a stress in raising cortisol, and then you're doing fasted exercise, you're just piling on, as you were saying, as I always say, that we're filling that beaker of stress, and it all comes into one filter. Your body doesn't
yep.
discriminate
It
what
does
that
not.
stress is. External and internal stresses all accumulate, and we need to identify what those are externally. And then I do functional lab testing to reveal what's going on inside, which is usually a result of our external stressors
Mm,
and eating in a stress state and doing everything in excess. But I think we need to stop, pause, reset, reflect. What am I doing now? Is it really working for me? And maybe this time of year, this comes out around the holidays, and maybe it's time to, do a reset and look at what you're doing and working with a coach that can help you with those struggles and personalize that journey and connect with them. I think it's important to have a coach, and I only do coaching programs now. I just switched this year to 6 months. Like the 3 month, 4 months, it doesn't work because it's a long
mm,
process. And
sure.
people that think they're just going to go do all this and be good in a few months, it's like, no, we got to course correct. We learn there's different things happen in the year and different trips and races and family activities, and it's just a journey. And it's not just, okay, let's do 2 coaching sessions and give you this and you're done. You need to have someone to work with, and coaches all need coaches too. We all have someone else that helps us, so it's important to do that. So anything else? We got to wrap up. We can talk for hours on this subject, I can tell.
Yeah, no. I think we're good. I think we've given them a lot to chew on. I don't want to keep
Okay.
talking because it's like you just keep going in circles.
I know. So where can people find you on Instagram, Facebook, website?
Yeah,
What's your
absolutely.
link?
So Instagram, Facebook, and website is the Keto Road. I'm also on TikTok, Jonathan Scott Shane. And yeah, those are the best places to find me.
That's a lot. I try to just do one as I'm older, and less is more is my mantra after having chronic
It's
stress
not a bad
issues that
idea. I've got myself in a bind here. I'm like,
it's better just to have like Instagram and forward it to everything else.
yeah,
So
no, absolutely.
awesome. Well, look at your Instagram is big. You have 13,000 followers, and metabolic specialist, functional nutritional therapy practitioner, and strength runner, the Keto Road. So check out the Keto Road on Instagram, and we will keep in touch. We'll have to do another podcast and talk about your race and fueling and recovering and all that a little more.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. I'll have to have you on as well. Definitely will have to make that happen.
Good. All right. Thanks so much.